I'm Abigail. This is Josh, and welcome to another Two Kids interview. Today, we are interviewing a USA Today bestselling author, Allie Millington. Miss Millington's debut book was a middle grade novel, Olivetti, that came out earlier this year, and her next book, Once for Yes, comes out in March of 2025. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Josh and Abigail. I'm really excited to get to talk with you.
There are so many books for kids to choose from. Sometimes there needs to be something extra to make you choose that one. Tom Hanks, reviewed your book in the New York Times and loved it. That helps it stick out. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So I actually knew that Tom Hanks loved typewriters um, since I started writing the book. He has a really cool documentary that's all about typewriters. And so he has a big collection. I think he has over 100 different typewriters that he's collected, which is crazy. As I was writing Olivetti, I had this idea in the back of my mind, which felt like a wild pipe dream. But I thought, wouldn't it be so cool if one day Tom Hanks could read my book? Since I know he loves typewriters, his favorite typewriter is an Olivetti. And so I just kept that dream sort of tucked away. And I told my family about it. We would joke about it sometimes. My mom would pretend to, think up different desserts she would make Tom Hanks if he ever came over for dinner. So it kind of just turned into a funny joke with my family. But then just a few days before my book came out, we got an email from the New York Times that said that Tom Hanks had read my book and he wrote a really amazing review. And so I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know he had my book or that he was even going to review it. So I was very surprised. And of course, I called my family right away and they were really excited too. And it just meant a lot that, obviously he's a busy guy. So it meant a lot that he took the time to read it. It was so kind.
Is it that the typewriter that you typed Olivetti on?
Yes, I don't know how well you can see it, but this is my Olivetti. You can see Olivetti written up at the top. And this is the typewriter that I bring around with me to all the different schools I visit and the bookstores I do events at. So this Olivetti's been all over the country with me on airplanes and in car rides, so he's seen a lot.
That's You wrote a book on a typewriter. I think Gary D. Schmidt still writes all of his books that way. He showed us the typewriter. I just wanted to check one thing with you. Did the typewriter type any messages back to you at all?
I love that question. I think in a way he did because I felt like I really got to know the character of Olivetti while I was typing on an Olivetti typewriter. And so as I was typing on it, I was sort of understanding how it might feel to be typed on and to have words stored inside of you and to collect all these stories and memories. So I really do feel like in a way my typewriter was kind of helping me write the story.
You set the book in San Francisco. Do you have any connection there?
I don't actually, funny enough. I've always wanted to go to San Francisco, so now I have a really good reason to visit. And I wish I could remember why exactly I chose San Francisco, but I think it's just always been a place I've been fascinated with. Um, I know there's a lot of cool typewriter shops in San Francisco too, so that kind of drew my attention. But hopefully one day I'll get to visit.
What is your process when putting a book together? Do you decide the end before the middle, or do you put it together in order?
I wish I put it together in any sort of order. I have a little bit of an idea of how I would like the story to go, but I'm sure you've heard from a bunch of different authors you've talked to that a story sort of has a mind of its own sometimes, and your characters are the ones who sort of write their own story. So as much as I have a plan for how the story works out, a lot of times the chapters and the scenes go in a completely different direction. But I think that's what makes for a really exciting story and one that feels real, because you're kind of letting the characters be themselves. So, yeah, I try, like I said, try to have a little bit of a plan when I'm writing, but I'm also, I hold it with a loose grip because I don't want to force anything in my story. I just want it to play out how it needs to play out.
Did you consider any other names for Olivetti, or were you always sure that you were naming it that?
I love that question. So actually, the book, when I first wrote it, I called it Sincerely Ernest, because Ernest, the other main character, he was writing some letters in that version of the story, and he would always sign them Sincerely Ernest. And I thought it was kind of a fun play on words because you guys know how Ernest loves his dictionary and he loves synonyms. And so sincere and the word earnest are kind of synonyms together. And so I thought it was a fun play on words there that Ernest would have appreciated. But as I continued writing the story, I realized, Olivetti, he's kind of the one telling most of the story. He loves being in the spotlight. He loves having the story all about him. So I switched the title over to Olivetti's name for a few reasons, but also just because I think that name really stands out and it's unique. That's kind of why I went with that one.
Your book coming out on March 25th, Once for Yes, deals with loss and grief. Can you tell us a bit about that story?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So Once for Yes, that actually has another unique narrator. It's told from the perspective of an old, grumpy apartment building named the Odenberg, who is sort of fed up with all of the different residents living inside of him. They've not taken the best care of him, and a lot of people just live inside of the Odenberg for a little bit and then they move away, and the Odenberg is always left behind. And one day, the Odenberg actually learns that he is going to be torn down, and all of the residents only have 30 days to move out and find a new place to live. And the Odenberg is thinking, no one's going to want to save me. No one's going to want to stay because everybody always leaves. But there's actually one really special resident who wants to stay, whose name is Prue. She's 12 years old, and she wants to stay in the Odenberg because she lost her sister the year before, and that's the last place she lived with her sister. And so she has so many important memories tied to that apartment that they lived in together. And so Prue is going to do whatever she can in order to save the Odenberg, and trying to get all the different residents in the building to work together.
You seem to be very interested in living objects. Why?
Yeah, it's funny. I think I've always been really interested in inanimate objects. When I was in third grade, I wrote a story for a writing contest that was all about a pencil. It was about how, without pencils, nobody could write stories, and pencils are kind of heroic in their own way. And so I think ever since then, I've just been really drawn to different objects or things that maybe most people don't think much about, but they actually play a really important role in our everyday lives and in, history. And so I've always been really fascinated with trying to look at the world from a different perspective, because I think it helps us understand ourselves a little bit better, and it helps us see the world in a new light. And so now that I've done it a few times, I'm kind of hooked. So it might be my thing for a while.
You also have a couple of picture books coming out soon.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about those?
Yeah, so my first picture book comes out next May, and it's called When You Find a Hope. And it's about this tree that grows hope from its branches. And one day, a girl climbs up the tree and grabs the highest hope she can find, and she takes it down with her, and she kind of carries her hope everywhere with her. She really cares about this hope, and her hope and her, they become inseparable. But then one day her hope is crushed, and she can't put her hope back together again. So the story kind of follows this girl after her hope is crushed, and she's trying to figure out, what can you do with a crushed hope? Will it ever be the same? Can you use it again? And how sometimes your hope has to be crushed in order for you to be able to share it with other people. And so that book actually, I wrote it when I was feeling a little bit hopeless about my writing. I'm sure you've heard this from other authors that sometimes it takes a really long time to be able to get a book published, and you face a lot of rejection and disappointment. And so I felt hopeless for a lot of years. This was my dream, but it wasn't happening for me. And so I wrote this book during that time of feeling hopeless. And now I'm just really grateful that I get to share that with other people who maybe will be feeling a certain way, a similar way where they feel kind of hopeless. So that comes out next May. And then the second picture book is called When You Find a Question, which that comes out the following year in 2026.
In November, you're going to the NCTE conference, and now the authors there are your peers. Is there anyone you're really hoping to meet?
Oh, wow. I love that question. I actually just got to meet an author who I really admire, who I know you guys have interviewed before, Jasmine Warga. Um, yeah, I know you guys talked to her not too long ago. So I got to meet her. Did you know her new book just came out? A Strange Thing Happened in Cherry Hall.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
terrific.
Yeah, I thought so too. It's so great. Such a really fun mystery, and it's really fast paced. So I went to a book event of hers not too long ago, and I got to meet her for the first time, which was really great because when I was you know, working on Olivetti, that was around the same time as her book A Rover's Story came out, which, as you know, is told from a unique perspective too. So I've always looked up to her writing, and it was really great getting to meet her. And so I'm just hoping to continue to meet a lot of new authors. I love meeting authors and hearing about their stories and what they're working on and how they got into this industry. So I'm really excited.
How much of your writing starts with the words "what if"?
Ooh. I would say probably a majority of my writing starts from that question of what if. That's actually how Olivetti kind of came to be. So my husband gave me my first typewriter as a way to say, I believe in you and I want you to keep writing. I believe in this dream that you have. And so it was a really encouraging gift. And as I started typing on my typewriter, I started wondering, who else has typed on these keys before, and what kind of stories and memories has this typewriter held? This is from 1956. It's pretty old. And so there's been probably plenty of owners who've used this typewriter before. And I started thinking about all the different things this typewriter might have heard. And the more I typed, the more it almost felt like my typewriter wanted to tell me all of these things. And so then I had a really fun question pop into my mind, which was a what if question. And it was, what if a typewriter could type back? And I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was trying to imagine, what would a typewriter say, and how would somebody react if they just saw a typewriter keys taking off on their own? And so that's kind of where the story started, was just asking a really big what if question.
Have you heard of the book "The Bear's Famous Invasion of Sicily"?
I haven't, no.
I ask because I saw you talk about how you were influenced by Lemony Snicket, and that books can be told in any way you want. We actually interviewed him yesterday. The Bear's Famous Invasion of Sicily was the first one to show Daniel Handler that.
Oh, wow. I've never heard of that book, but that's amazing. You just got to interview him. That's so cool. I'll have to add that book to my list.
In that book, the narrator keeps criticizing the illustration, saying he's getting it wrong. Turns out the author was the illustrator too.
Oh my gosh. That's so good. Did you guys read Series of Unfortunate Events?
Yeah,
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 they're so amazing. I
yeah,
love
I
those.
loved it.
Did you watch any of the movies or the TV
I
show?
watched, I watched the TV show.
Hmm.
Um, no, not yet.
Not yet. Well, that's cool. Was it awesome getting to talk to him yesterday? I bet. That's amazing. So cool that you guys get to talk to so many authors. I love it.
Thanks, including you.
Oh, this is fun.
There are more books being challenged and banned than ever before. Can you give us your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's a really important question to ask, and I think that everyone has the right to write the books that they're passionate about, write about the things that they care about, the people that they care about. And so I just think it's important for these stories to exist because there's so many different types of people who are going through similar situations that authors are writing about. And when we take those books away from libraries and schools, we're almost saying that those experiences that people have don't matter anymore. And that's just not right. Those experiences are true to people, they're true to life. And so they need to be represented. And so I think that we need to be accepting of all these different types of stories, and we shouldn't be afraid to share these true life experiences with other people. So it just makes me sad that a lot of amazing books and a lot of amazing authors are being banned when all they're doing is writing stories that they're passionate about and that are true to them and to the things that they care about. And so I'm just hoping that things could change soon and people will continue to fight for the freedom of books and the freedom of sharing those stories around because it's more important than ever for every voice to be heard.
We agree.
I'm glad.
Do you have any concerns about artificial intelligence and its possible impact on the future of publishing?
Wow. That is that is another really big question. As you can tell, I'm pretty old school. I love my typewriter, and I love sort of anything old fashioned and vintage. So I'm not a huge fan of AI. I think it's probably can be very helpful in some ways, but then in other ways, I feel like it might take away from opportunities that people in so many different industries, as authors included, it takes away some opportunities and it takes away the ability and the freedom to be creative for a lot of people. And so I think, obviously there are things we could be afraid of in that regard, but then also I feel like we have to believe in the power of creativity and the power of these stories that people can tell. And I don't think anything artificial will ever be able to match just the empathy and the emotion and the care and thought that goes into creating a story. I think that it just won't ever compare. So as much as there are some, scary things happening there, I also think that books and stories are something that will never phase out. We'll always need stories. We'll always need books that we can escape to. And so I'm just hoping that, more and more young readers are encouraged to read and write for themselves because you guys are the next authors and the next readers, growing up. And so that's why I think it's so cool to get to be talking to you and see how much you guys are passionate about this, because I think you'll probably encourage a lot of other kids who are interested in books and reading and interviewing. I think they'll be really encouraged by what you guys do. So that's great.
Can you tell us exactly where you were and your reaction when you found out Olivetti was going to be published?
Wow. Well, it happened kind of quickly. So I'd been writing for years and years and got, like I said, a lot of rejections and a lot of just disappointing news. And so I kind of had the thought that this dream might not ever come true, but obviously I kept at it because it was my dream and it was what I wanted more than anything. And so the news that Olivetti was going to be published really came as a shock. I was in my house and I got the email and I honestly couldn't believe what I was seeing because, after being told for so long that and thinking that my books were never going to work out and never going to get to be shared with other people, to all of a sudden see that this was actually going to happen. It was kind of hard to believe at first. And so it definitely took me a while to realize that this was real and actually grasp that it was happening. And I think it wasn't until I got to hold the physical copy of the book and see it in the world that I actually was starting to believe that it had happened.
What writer has had the most influence on you?
Wow. Can I pick more than one? Is that cheating?
Yeah, you can probably pick more than one. Yeah, sure.
Probably. Okay. Let's see. Well, I really absolutely love Catherine Applegate. Have you guys ever gotten to talk with her?
Not yet. No.
Yeah. Okay.
You want
Well, I
to?
love, you want to? Yeah, I want to too. I absolutely love the way that she has empathy and kindness at the core of every story that she writes, and she makes you fall in love with such unexpected characters, from an oak tree to a gorilla to an otter. She just, makes you really feel for these characters, and they feel so real to you and so authentic. And so I really admire how she's able to just bring such positive messages into the world. And also she's able to bring so many beautiful moments and thoughts and ideas into the world with, not even using that many words. She's very, very great at just delivering a really powerful message with even just a few sentences. So I would say I really admire her work. And then I'll just cheat a little bit and add one more. I really, really love A. Milne, who wrote Winnie the Pooh. I'm not sure if you guys have ever read that, but I just think the way that he weaves humor and a lot of lightheartedness into his stories, he's just very clever. So I look up to his writing a lot too.
What advice do you have for young writers?
Well, are you guys young writers? I'm curious.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm really glad to hear that. So some advice for young writers. I think, when I was growing up, I kind of was thinking, do I have to be ready or feel ready to become a writer? Do I have to feel smart enough or feel like I've lived enough life or have enough experience? But I realized that all I really need to be is me to be able to write. And that the stories that I want to tell in the way that I want to tell them are really important. I don't have to try to sound like anyone else. As much as it's great to, look up to other authors and you enjoy the way they write and that can inspire you, I also think it's really important to find your own voice and write about the things that are interesting to you and the things that you're passionate about and that you care about. Because one, you're going to have more fun writing about things that you like, but then two, there's going to be other young readers out there who will read your work and say, oh my gosh, I love that too. Or I'm so glad Abigail wrote this book about this because I've always wanted to read a book like that, So I think that when we write about the things that are interesting to us, that makes other people feel, one, interested in those things too, but then also gives them the freedom to write about what's interesting to them as well. So I would say, you don't have to wait until you're ready. You feel like you're ready to start. You can just go ahead and start and write about whatever is really interesting to you and whatever you care about.
What are you writing now?
Right now, I am writing my next middle grade book, which will come out in 2026, and it is called Earl Grey. And it's about a girl named Earl Grey who has been raised at this really interesting library, which is called the Repertorium. And at the Repertorium, instead of books, it's full of different sorts of objects and artifacts that are all tied to specific memories. And so when a visitor comes into the Repertorium and they're scanning the shelves, they could touch something on the shelf, and as soon as they touch it, they're able to see a specific memory that's tied to that object. And so there's different sections in the repertorium. There's a happiness section where you can go and see happy memories, or there's a thrill section if you want to go feel what it's like to fly a plane or go skydiving. And so this girl, Earl Grey, has been raised at the repertorium. She's lived there her whole life, but she's starting to realize she wants to see what else is out there. She wants to make friends, and she wants to explore and go on adventures. So she's going to have to figure out, what's life like outside of the repertorium.
You know what I don't like about that? Is that I have to wait until 2026 to read that.
I know it sounds so far away, right? But at least it gives me a little bit more time to write it and make sure it's in good shape for you to read it, because I wouldn't want you to read it now. It's pretty rough.
Finally, it's time for Turbo 10. 10
Ooh.
rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Number 1. What is your favorite phrase to use?
What'd you say? Sorry, it cut out.
What is your favorite phrase to use?
Favorite phrase to use? Right now, in my book, I'm saying huzzah a lot, which is kind of funny and weird.
Number 2. What is one subject you'd love to learn more about?
One subject I'd love to learn more about is actually how to fly a hot air balloon.
Number 3. What is your go-to snack food?
That's easy. Popcorn, always popcorn, buttery, salty, and hot popcorn.
Number 4. What was your favorite book growing up?
Favorite book growing up, I think, would probably have to be, I can't narrow it down, but all of the series of Unfortunate Events, the whole series. So all 12 of those.
Number 5. If you could teleport somewhere right now, where would you go?
I would love to go to New Zealand.
Number 6. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I would love to fly, and then I would fly myself to New Zealand.
Number 7. What was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
Favorite cartoon? Oh, wow. Geez. I mean, I think I have to go with classic SpongeBob, probably. Can't go wrong with SpongeBob, right?
I think my dad would say the opposite.
He's not a SpongeBob fan?
No.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Number 8. What is your favorite rainy day activity?
Favorite rainy day activity is building a fort and then curling up inside of it and reading a book.
Number 9. If you could have any 3 dinner guests, who would they be?
Oh my gosh, 3 dinner guests. I would love to eat dinner with Tom Hanks so I could thank him for reading my book. I would love to have dinner with Catherine Applegate so I could ask her a million questions about writing. And let's see. Oh man. I guess let's see. I'm trying to think of somebody else. I think I would also really love to have dinner with Peter Brown, who wrote The Wild Robot, because I would love to ask him a lot of questions about writing too.
Number 10. What was the best piece of advice you were ever given?
Ever? Wow. That is another huge question. I think probably, well, I remember my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Limo. He was the first person who kind of made me believe that I could be a writer one day. And, he said, you're never going to be able to share your words with everybody unless you start passing them out there. You start getting yourself and putting yourself out there. So he was the first person who made me share my stories with people. And even though it was really scary, it made me a lot braver, and it made me realize I think I want to do this the rest of my life. So thank you to Mr. Limo.
You were awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
Of
And
course.
thank you so much for spending time with us. We can't wait to read your future books.
Oh, well, I love talking to you guys. Thanks so much for having me.